Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the morning analysis, the analysis that's normally for my patrons. But because of Donald Trump's speech last night, I ended up missing my show, waiting for him to finish up his speech because I wanted to cover whatever he discussed. And after about an hour or so of it, I realized, you know what? I have to do this tomorrow. So this is going to be a morning analysis for everyone. But if you want to get access to our regular morning analyses and our backlog of all of our morning analyses, just go to patreon.com. Let's start with Donald Trump and his speech last night. Donald Trump officially owns the Afghanistan war. I remember there was a moment around 2010. Yeah, it had to be 2010 because I was married. That President Obama came out and spoke about his plan for Afghanistan. And at that moment, it was no longer George W. Bush's war. It was Barack Obama's war. Donald Trump has come out a little faster than President Obama, and he has come out and, basically made it seem as though he was going to do something uniquely different. But in reality, he's doing the exact same thing that in many regards, the exact same thing as what President Obama did. The only difference is that he's not divulging how many troops he's sending. Ooh, big difference, right? We don't want to know how many troops are going, because as though that's going to surprise the Taliban and Al Qaeda and whoever else is left in Afghanistan, as though that's going to surprise them more to not know how many troops are coming. But okay, we'll give you that. But besides that, it's pretty much the same strategy that's been employed by both Obama and President Bush. And I think this is why it's so important, vitally important for us to not buy into the convenient narrative that Bush is somehow better than Trump. Because President Bush should never be redeemed from what he did to the world. It's very few people that you could say this person screwed the world. George W. Bush and his neoconservative foreign policy screwed America, but more importantly, the entire goddamn world. Because we are stuck in a quagmire in Afghanistan that is now the longest war. If you're not counting the Korean War, it's now the longest war in American history, with no end in sight. That's the most devastating thing. Now, partly it was a necessary war in Afghanistan to root out Al Qaeda, or if nothing else, America had everybody with the exception of very few anti-war protesters. America had a lust for revenge against the perpetrators of 9/11, which doesn't make sense because 19 of the hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. So we couldn't go to war with Saudi Arabia, so we picked the next best thing where we felt Osama bin Laden was hiding. So anyway, I digress. Not to relitigate why we got into that war, but the fact of the matter is, once we got into it, it became a quagmire that was unwinnable. And I think that's so important that this new terrorism is not a war that you can win with conventional warfare. And it's like fighting a guerrilla war, right? It's like Vietnam in the sense that it was such an intransigent fight, and we're fighting now such a dispersed and scattered group of militants that are not controlled by a particular state, right? They're non-state actors. And so we're trying to win 16 years, 17 years. We've been trying to win an unconventional war with conventional warfare means. And this is a huge problem for us because can anybody see an end in sight? I don't think a single person can see an end in sight for the Afghanistan war and the mess that we have in our Iraq. I'm trying to get this sunlight off of me because the sun is beaming. But does anybody really see a reasonable end in sight? I don't think that there is. And the reason I don't think that there is because we're fighting a different type of war that cannot be won through conventional means. But that's besides the point. The point is this. Now, Donald J. Trump owns the Afghanistan war. And you know why that matters? It matters because it matters for many reasons. Number one, because it just shows you a continuation in the same in this. We don't have any good options there. And so the real option is pull out and let it fall the way it's going to fall, or continue to feed the military-industrial complex and stay there and continue to lose lives on both sides, predominantly on the other side. I believe we lost about 2,200 Americans, 20,000 have been injured, and countless hundreds of thousands have been killed on the other side of the ledger. So the only option, real option, is to pull out, because no one has a reasonable plan for us to win this war. But then you do face the possibility of creating a vacuum, just like Donald Trump said, just like Barack Obama said, just like George W. Bush said. But the problem is once you create, once you open Pandora's box and you break it, you know, you own it. And so America owns it. And now Donald Trump owns it. And we're stuck there. And we're stuck sending our another generation of kids. Eventually, we'll be sending kids. We're almost at that point. You realize 16 years in, we're only about 2, maybe 3 years away from sending people into Afghanistan that were not even alive when 9/11 happened. And we might have already done so, because I think there's still a waiver that you could sign as parents for someone who's under 18 for them to join. I don't know who would have been that ambitious to do that, but you know, we're getting ready to send an entire generation of kids who were not even involved, who were not alive rather, when 9/11 occurred, into a war that started because of 9/11. Do you understand how insidious and how ridiculous that is? That is absurd. That is insane. But again, let me get back to the main point. The main point is that Donald Trump owns this war, and that matters for another reason. The other reason it matters is because Donald Trump ran on a quote-unquote anti-war platform. And I wondered if anybody really listened to his language last night. See, Donald Trump has never been anti-war. Donald Trump has been anti-nation building that doesn't benefit the United States. See, Donald Trump has a very unique language, very specific type of language when he speaks about war. And the same thing goes for the alt-right and people who support him, the 35% who still support him. They support him because he has an anti-nation building language, but is willing to have and engage in a war of clash of civilization, right? They're willing to go to war against Islam, but they are not willing to go to war against Islam if it's for the sake of nation building. It's a very specific type. They're America first. And by America first, they mean a very specific type of Americanism. And so this really unveils the reality that Donald Trump supporters and Donald Trump and his supporters were never really anti-war. And so now he is no different. In fact, he's actually now worse. You realize the escalation of drone usage underneath Donald Trump has killed more civilians, more collateral damage in, I believe, 6 months than almost the entire 8 years of President Obama's tenure. So Donald Trump is escalating these wars, and he owns it. And so now it's like, you know, if we can't, what are we supposed to do? What do we do here? Somebody tweeted it pretty succinctly this morning. They tweeted and said that if a cerebral professor and a senile game show host, it's Cushbaum from at Cushbaum from Chapo Trap House. He said, what's the point? If they are both going to do the same exact thing with regard to war, then what's the point? And you know, it's a point of exasperation rather, that I don't think I really hear from those guys often, but a level of frustration with the reality that America is going to war. It's just that's what we do, is we war. And that's all we've known for 16 years. I mean, shit, that's almost half of my life, that all we've done is engage in hot war, right? And this constantly feeds our military-industrial complex, so they're happy. I mean, I'm sure there's a research article out there or a journal article that shows exactly who is getting the most to gain out of this, who's making the most money off of this generation-old war, But the point is this: we're stuck in two conundrums. The first one is that this is just a broken situation to which there is no good solution, and now Donald Trump is realizing the same thing that George. God damn, so many bad presidents. That Barack Obama had to realize the hard way, which is there's really no good solution here. And now that you're president, you don't have the luxury of criticizing these wars, because now you have to be the commander in chief and facilitate these wars. And so this is what Donald Trump has now stepped into. He's moved past this. Oh, we should never have gotten into it. Yeah, okay, now you're in it. Now you're in it, and what do? How do you fix what George W. Bush broke? And I want to reiterate something I said about 5 minutes ago, maybe 6 minutes ago. I want to say it again. Anytime somebody lifts up George W. Bush as a good president compared to Donald Trump, they almost need the digital taste slapped out of their mouth, because George W. Bush has broken the world. He didn't break the world order. Unfortunately, the world order is very accustomed to absorbing global conflict. A matter of fact, our global order, our world order, is built on conflict. So the global order is not broken, but the modicum of stability and peace that we had was fundamentally broken by George W. Bush getting us, particularly in the Iraq War. But now we see, even with Afghanistan, it was a war that we could not win. It was a war that we could not win unless we were going to utterly destroy Afghanistan and then rebuild Afghanistan and make a 50-year to 100-year commitment to Afghanistan to make sure that we build institutions that would not allow terrorism to take root. But this is where Donald Trump's ideology or his doctrine with regard to war is the most detrimental. Because if you're just going to wage war and not rebuild what you broke, then you're going to continuously leave situations in which fundamentalists and terrorists can take advantage of the chaos and radicalize more people. Don't get me wrong, our bombs are radicalizing people, yes, but the gaping void of no infrastructure, the gaping void of no education opportunities, the gaping void of desperation always is a perfect environment for radicalization. So we're just creating the next generation of terrorists, not only because we're engaging in war and killing their brothers and sisters. That probably is the number one radicalization tool, but also because we're destroying it without leaving anything in its stead. We're not leaving anything there that a nation can be. If you're going to destroy a nation, you got to build a goddamn nation. And I think America in general, all of our presidents neglect that fact. If you're going to go to war and destroy a nation, then you got to build that nation back up, or else you're going to give all the ammunition, all the rhetorical ammunition that is needed for full-on radicalization. We didn't even do that in Germany or Japan, because we knew better back then. We knew that if we destroyed an entire nation's infrastructure, that the only way to maintain the peace is to rebuild it. So now not only are we engaging in wars that we should never have engaged in the first place, but we're engaging in them in the most ridiculous and asinine way imaginable. All right, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about Donald Trump's speech. I got to go back and listen to it again because I was in and out of consciousness. It was like everybody was speaking, giving adulations, and oh, it was such a great speech. And I'm like, it's a great speech if you consider a person that's doped up on sedatives, horse tranquilizers, and manages to actually read a teleprompter without going off script. If you consider that, if you consider that successful, then okay, yeah, it was successful. But in terms of the substance, it means that Donald Trump now owns the war. He's not going to do anything fundamentally different than President Obama or George W. Bush did, with the exception of making it clear he has zero interest in nation building, but he has all the interest in destroying things. And so that's just going to further exacerbate this problem that we have in Afghanistan. And Donald Trump also likes to, and I'm gonna study a little bit more about the potential reaction from India and from Pakistan, because Donald Trump brought them into the equation. I mean, don't get me wrong, Pakistan was already in the equation, but by him calling out India and Pakistan, I'm really curious as to how they might respond to the president, if at all. Maybe they're smart and we're like, he's an idiot, so we're not going to respond to idiots. But anyway, I digress. Here's the second thing I wanted to talk about, and I didn't talk about last night because of the speech with Donald Trump. Umar Johnson, if you don't know who he is, I would say look him up, but I don't want you to give him any clicks, but maybe you should look him up. Umar Johnson is a black nationalist. He is a renown, in his circles. He is beloved in his circles. Outside of his circles, he's a clown. And I have intention. There's certain people that I avoid because when I got too much stress in my life anyway, and I don't need another fight with a whole nother set of people. But Umar Johnson is one of those people I avoid because, it would involve me inserting myself into his space and then arguing with